If you've been around for a while, then you know how much I care about financial freedom for all. One thing that often gets in the way of that is debt. That's why I'm happy to announce that I've partnered with an amazing organization called Juno. Juno helps you get lower interest rates by using the power of group negotiation. It is a completely free resource that you can use to secure lower interest rates on new and existing student loans. Head to the link in the episode show notes to find out more. This is the Dreamers Podcast, episode 25, with speaker, author, and host of the Money Tips for Financial Grownups podcast, Bobbi Rebell. Today is July 6th, 2021.
Especially for women, networking, supporting each other, it's really important to share. For example, we both want to do speaking engagements. I think that we could share what kind of asks we have or what people offer us, really to make sure that the marketplace is fair. Are we getting paid the same based on gender, based on race, based on age, based on qualifications? That information is important to share. You and I can have a private phone call and we can talk about what kind of offers we get and make sure to have each other's back.
Hello, world. Welcome to the Dreamers Podcast. I am Stephanie Anne-Lyse, also known as Anne-Lyse Wealth. I'm a financial coach and an author. I self-published my first book, Dream of Legacy, a guide to help dreamers reach financial independence and build generational wealth. In this podcast, I'll have conversations with experts and thought leaders who dare to follow their dreams. You'll hear about their journey and their money stories. I hope it inspires you, dreamers out there, to live life on your own terms.
Come on, dreamers, let's change the world!
This episode is brought to you by Dream of Legacy. Check out dreamoflegacy.com for resources to assist you on your journey to financial independence. Hello, welcome to the Dreamers Podcast. I'm your host, Anne-Lyse Wealth, and I'm so happy that you're here with me today for episode 25 of the podcast. For close to 4 months, I have been releasing a new episode every week, and I'm so happy to celebrate this milestone with you. You know, when I started the podcast, I wasn't sure that I would be able to keep up with the cadence of releasing a new episode every week, but I made a commitment to myself to show up every week for a year. And so it feels good to be 1/3 through the goal. And I want to continue to show up here and share stories of amazing change makers and share tools that you can use to live your best life, however you envision it. I am very excited to share today's episode with Bobbi Rebell. Bobbi Rebell is a speaker and the author of How to Be a Financial Grownup, proven advice from high achievers on how to live your dreams and have financial freedom. She is also the host of the Money Tips for Financial Grownups podcast. In 2017, Bobbi left her job as a global business news television anchor and personal finance columnist at Thomson Reuters to expand her Financial Grownup brand into other channels of financial educational content. Previously, she had worked at CNBC, CNN, and PBS. Bobbi is a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania, and she received her certificate in financial planning from New York University. She lives in New York City with her husband, their 3 kids, and their dog. So today, Bobbi is going to share many tips about how to be a financial grown-up and also how to raise financial grown-ups. We'll touch on spending lessons from the pandemic, some great everyday money tips, what we can do individually to help create a fair marketplace, regardless of gender, race, or any other factor that companies or individuals use to offer lower compensation. We're talking retirement and prenups. I hope you appreciate all of the valuable lessons from today's episode. So here is Bobbi Rebell. Bobbi Rebell, welcome to the Dreamers Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel honored to be in such good company, both with you and with a lot of my friends that have been on the podcast.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. Do you mind telling our listeners a little bit about you and what you do?
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, like I said, I am thrilled to be here. I am a certified financial planner and I am the author of How to Be a Financial Grownup. I have a podcast called Money Tips for Financial Grownups, which you will be appearing on. So we're excited to hear what your money tips are going to be for my grownups. And on the theme of grownup, I recently launched a merch line called Grownup Gear, which is at grownupgear.com. And it's all kinds of fun gifts for adulting, basically to celebrate the adulting milestones in our lives.
So tell us a little bit about your podcast. How do you define a financial grown-up?
I love that question. And it's something that we each have to define for ourselves. And I think it's always evolving. It's when you're comfortable with where you are financially and you're on track to meet your goals. It doesn't mean that you've met all your goals. It's not necessarily being debt free. It's about understanding where you are in your life, taking control and having a plan to get where you want to go as well.
Love that. And, some of our listeners, they are in different stages of their financial journeys. So for anyone that's listening right now that is just looking to improve their finances, what are some of the steps that you would recommend that they take to become financial grown-ups?
I would, first of all, do an assessment of where you are. I think it's really important to get that snapshot, that benchmark of what is actually going on in your financial life. And that can be as simple as, doing a net worth statement, even on a piece of paper, figure out what you owe, which sadly, maybe more than you think, put in all those things. Sometimes we forget, for example, our mortgage and, the good debt that is not necessarily a bad thing. Even student debt, I would say in many cases is good debt because it helped you achieve a goal, assuming that you did get through school and get your degree in whatever you were studying. And then of course, the bad debt, things like credit card debt and so on. And, some things are sort of in that gray area where car loans can sometimes not be the best thing. A lot of them are longer timelines than I would like to see these days. But at the end of the day, if you need a car to get to your job, of course, a car is a good idea. Just maybe think about getting the car for the most reasonable price in terms of a reliable car and that kind of stuff. So write down what you owe and then write down what you have. And then once you see that, you'll start to get a picture and then move forward and think about what your needs are. How much money does it cost to be you? What does your life cost to live? What are the nice to haves? What are the need to haves? And the pandemic gave us such a great opportunity for this because I found a lot of the things that I thought were the need to haves were not. And I think a lot of people were surprised at how much less their lives cost. And we can take a lot of lessons from how our spending changed. When the pandemic started, if you had said to me a year and 3 months from now, will people be in a better position financially or worse? I would have said everyone will be devastated. And many people are devastated, to be clear. Many people lost their livelihoods. Many people lost their jobs. Thankfully, we've had some solid government assistance for that. However, it is shocking how many people who did not lose their jobs, who did not lose their businesses, and kind of just kept living their life, but within the changes that happened in the pandemic are so much better off. It's crazy. And I mean, a lot of that money has gone into the stock market. And that's why we're seeing, as of this recording, the stock market has been once again at record highs because people had money to invest and people are shopping and the economy is growing. And that's crazy when you think about the fact that, wait a second, we've been in this lockdown for so long. I mean, does it surprise you?
So I think yes and no, because, we were stuck at home. So like you said, there are things that were part of your everyday life that you thought were essential, right? But you realized during a pandemic that you didn't need them. You didn't need to go shopping as much, for instance. I think it makes sense for the people who were able to, keep their jobs, to have more money to invest and to actually do it. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the things that you thought you couldn't leave without before the pandemic?
Okay, so I'm going to give you some superficial things that, of course, I kind of knew I would live without, but that I really didn't miss as much as I thought I would. I didn't really have any huge changes in that sense to my life. I actually grew up having a housekeeper every 2 weeks. Haven't had one since the pandemic, started. I cannot say my house is as clean as it used to be. It is not. I'm not very good at it. But the fact is, life goes on. My nails have not been done in a year and a half. I always had my nails looking nice and they do look nice, but they are not done in a salon. I don't know that I'll go back to that. I always knew that I didn't have to go to an exercise class. But what I would say to you to defend the spending on it was, I can't motivate without being physically there with other people. So I was spending in New York City. I was doing it. This was my splurge. I want to say without buying a multi-pack, I would buy them on sale, this and that. But the retail price was like $35 a class. And I probably paid less because I'm always shopping for the deals. Now for that same class with the instructors that I used to see in person, I can get it for $20 a month online. Recorded, not live. So there's nobody giving me feedback, to be clear. There's nobody pushing me, to be clear. I'm not interacting with other people, but I'm doing it. And that's less than one class. I don't know that I'm going to go back to in person. So that's a huge change. And that wasn't a need to have ever, but it was something I was doing. What's very interesting, and I always knew this was a splurge, was I used to have to do a lot of moving around New York City where I live to transport my son different places. And so because I was in transit, I would buy a lot of coffees at Starbucks. That was a massive savings. So that was interesting though. And now he's about to turn 14. So he's now at a point through the pandemic, he moved from me walking him around at age 12. We were starting to do a little bit of walking alone, and now he's independent. So that expense went away because I'm not constantly transporting a child around. What about you?
Most of our expenses went down, except like the grocery bill. It's still not under control. So on your podcast, you get everyday money tips from your guests.
Yes.
Are there like some tips that stand out to you that you want to share with our audience?
Oh gosh, you're putting me on the spot. I love the really quirky ones. Like we had one person said, floss your teeth, I think they said, because it was the New York Times writer who had a book that came out, I think about housing, I forget. But anyway, he's a New York Times writer, and he said, floss your teeth, because believe it or not, one of the biggest things that's going to hit you if you don't is dental bills. And I thought that was a really good thing. And then there's like the really simple, obvious ones that are like mind game ones. So I remember someone said, when you search for a product online, you can sort like price high to low, bestsellers, whatever. Always sort low to high.
Oh, yeah, that's what I do.
Usually the default will be high to low, and then you get the everyday ones, which are always about being mindful of your budget and not making rash decisions. One of them that's a classic that a lot of people like to say is, when you buy something, wait 24 hours, because sometimes the company will send you a coupon for a further discount to kind of entice you to check out and, convert your basket into a sale. So the tips are really fun. So much so that I recently retitled the podcast from just Financial Grownup to Money Tips for Financial Grownups, because people love the money tips on the podcast so much.
If you've been around for a while, then you know how much I care about financial freedom for all. One thing that often gets in the way of that is debt. That's why I'm happy to announce that I've partnered with an amazing organization called Juno. Juno helps you get lower interest rates by using the power of group negotiation. It is a completely free resource that you can use to secure lower interest rates on new and existing student loans. Head to the link in the episode show notes to find out more. Sunday, Skincare Day, is one of the ways I keep my sanity in these crazy times. Jumino is an all-natural, Black-owned skincare brand carefully handcrafted by parents who could not find the proper care solutions to address their family skin problems. All Jumino products are made of organic and high-quality ingredients, meticulously chosen to give your skin the smooth results and the glow it deserves. And those are great tips. I know that for me, when I sort from low to high, it's also because I just get tired of scrolling down. So at some point I'm going to stop. So I'm not going to get to like the really high price point. So it's also like to stop myself from purchasing something that I probably shouldn't.
Oh, totally. Yes. And they're always, and also make sure that you skip. Sometimes the first results look like they're results, but in fact, they are advertisements. So just be aware of that. That doesn't mean you can't choose them. It's your choice, but make sure that you understand what you're seeing.
Help me understand kind of like your background. I know you're a CFP, but like, can you share an early memory that you have when it comes to money and how it impacted your views as an adult?
So I actually only became a CFP in 2017. And I became a CFP because my book, How to Be a Financial Grownup, had come out. And I had interviewed experts. I was a journalist and I wanted to have the credibility to be an expert myself because I felt a lot of imposter syndrome when the book came out and people presumed that I was an expert when in fact I was a journalist. How did I become a journalist? Well, I was very interested in sharing stories always. And my dad, as we talked about before we were recording, had been on Wall Street and he really wanted me to work on Wall Street and I wanted to be a reporter. So we compromised and I got an internship in financial news. And so from there, after college, I was able to work my way up. My first job was at CNBC. From there, I moved my way up to higher positions within the company and then eventually made a few moves. And I was a business news anchor on Reuters, which is a big global news network. And I was a business news anchor there for 15 years before I left to write my book.
And so speaking of that, you had a high profile job. What made you want to do something else?
Well, as I mentioned, I did do it for 15 years. So I think everybody gets tired of everything. Even though it sounds super glamorous, at a certain point, you've interviewed so many CEOs and you've done so many reports about the Fed that you're looking for something new. And I was looking for something that would make an impact because a lot of the news that I was doing was really directed towards things that weren't tangential to people, that weren't specific. It's talking about earnings reports from companies. It's talking about Fed policy. It's interviewing CEOs of companies about their corporate plans. I wanted to do something to help individual people with their money that would have a specific impact on people's lives. And as I said, it was an amazing job. I enjoyed it, but it is frantic. It is exhausting. It is a burnout job. And I had done it. And I think it was important for me to move on to something where I felt I was actually making a difference. And I know that sounds so cliche, but it's the truth.
And so you have 3 kids, right?
I have 3 kids. Now, 2 are older stepkids that I raised with my husband. They're 24 and 21. And then my husband and I have a 13-year-old together.
So can you maybe talk about how you are raising them to know about personal finance? Share maybe some tips with the parents or parents-to-be that are listening?
So this is such a great question. And thank you, because it gives me the lead into the book that I'm writing right now, which is called Launching Financial Grownups. And it's all about teaching your young adult children how to be independent financially from you and in a loving way. And it's very important that I emphasize that it's not about not paying for their dinner when you're out to dinner together. You can take your daughter to a spa day. That's fine, but don't pay their rent. There's a difference. You love your children. You should also, by the way, be there if they need you. If your children are in crisis, by all means, help them. I don't want people to misunderstand that. My general method with them is everyday money tips every day. My son, he had a small injury a few months ago, and it was actually before the first of the year. And he got a little annoyed. I got a little eye roll on this, but while we were waiting for the doctor, I, of course, chime in there and say, well, the good news, Harry, financially, is that since it's the end of the year, we've already used up our deductible on our insurance. So insurance will cover this visit fully. And he's just giving me this eye roll like, Mom, I know at this point, the poor kid's 13. They get an earful about how health insurance works and that kind of thing, and understanding the deductible and the premium and, the copay and all of those things. But you do it in the moment and you'll get the eye roll. But then they do understand. I mean, the 24-year-old has come to me really happy with herself, as she should be, when she knows a lot more than her friends about things that are pretty basic. But she fully gets it when it comes to how the 401k works and, how her money has to be allocated so that she can afford to save for a down payment to buy a home. They're hearing it.
And, you just have to hope that half of it will stick, right?
Look, you get to repeat things in different ways. Things come up more often than not. And I think it's important to remind them of that. My son damaged his computer this weekend because he did not listen to me when I said to put it in a case when we were going somewhere. I said, if you want to bring your computer, make sure you put it in a case. He did not. It is damaged. I made an appointment at the store to have it looked at and be repaired. And you know what? I made the appointment at a time that he can come with me because I want him to have to go to the store and get the lecture about the fact that you need to take care of your computer. And I want him to see what it's going to cost to repair it and to be there. And we'll decide together whether we want to spend the money to repair that computer, because I'm pretty mad at him, as you can tell. But if he sees relative to, if the computer costs this much money and it's going to cost this much to repair, and I say, it's not in our budget to fix it. We can buy you a new computer for next school year. And we're recording this in May. School doesn't start till September. What are you going to do? I'll just ask him, what are you going to do if your computer doesn't work? I think it's important that they feel a little bit of pain and that they feel that they have skin in the game as well.
So do you believe that there's such a thing as helping a little too much when it comes to your kids?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that we are all tempted to do that because it's a lot easier, especially if you have the money, to just throw money at solving the problem. And the bigger problem is a lot of us, when we don't have the money, throw money to solve the problem. And we create our own financial chaos in the background because we don't want our children to worry about us or to think that we don't have the money. And so a lot of parents put themselves in precarious positions with the best intentions, and their children have no idea. And their children, especially their young adult children, would never take that money if they thought in any way it would put their parents in a bad position. But parents never want to tell their children, oh, I actually don't have $500 to help you with your car repair. What parent wants to say that? So it's really important to not have them ask. Again, unless they're in a truly dire situation. We're always going to be there for our kids when it's really down to the wire. I don't want any parent to ever get that impression.
So how transparent do you think parents should be when it comes to their finances with their kids?
This is my favorite question because the answer is up to them and it's complicated. I will tell you, my husband and I disagree. Because of that, he wins because he wants to be less transparent. And I don't think it's fair to him. There's no sort of halfway on that. For now, our children do not have as much transparency as I would like them to have, but I give them transparency on items that are appropriate. As I just mentioned, computer repair. My son will learn what it's going to cost to repair his computer. I also want to mention that because of the internet, many children can know a lot about their parents' financial lives without you telling them. So they can know, for example, what your house cost. It's very simple. There's no secret government database. It's all on Zillow. If you own a home, it's pretty easy to look up what you paid.
Absolutely.
So they're going to know. If you have a job that can fit into a category, they can figure out pretty quickly the ballpark of what you make. To me, it's kind of out there. But I also respect the fact that sometimes people just want to keep things private. I mean, I think there's a big movement to be very transparent with your finances. And I think that it can be appropriate in some situations, especially for women, networking, supporting each other. It's really important to share. For example, we both want to do speaking engagements. I think that we could share what kind of asks we have or what people offer us, really to make sure that the marketplace is fair. Are we getting paid the same based on gender, based on race, based on age, based on qualifications? That information is important to share. You and I can have a private phone call and we can talk about what kind of offers we get and make sure to have each other's back.
Great point. Great point. Before we started recording, you mentioned that your daughter was getting ready to purchase her first property.
Yes.
In New York, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she's 24
and a half.
That's something most 24-year-old can't, afford to do in New York. So how did you even get her to think about that?
So she was thinking about it. She moved in with us when she was 13. She's my stepdaughter. So she moved in full time when she was 13. I met her when she was 8. It's interesting. She wrote this wonderful letter to the co-op board because in New York City, we have co-ops. And she talks about the fact that she has been working on this project since she was 13, saving all of her money. Wow. So when you say she's 24 and a half, yes, but have you been saving for 11 years, right? So that's the first answer. It has been a goal of hers for 11 years. So it's not an overnight success, number one. I can't say every dime has gone to it. No, of course, she's done trips with her friends. She lives a life. She goes out with friends, but she is always thinking about that goal in the back of her head and being mindful of how she spends her money, whether it's clothing, whether it's helping her friends maybe go to a more affordable restaurant, or even just being aware. Sometimes they do go to an expensive restaurant and she'll talk to me about that. She'll say, this friend, it's her birthday. They said she could choose the place and she chose an expensive place and I'm not happy about it. And I'm kind of like, well, this is what happens. Sometimes you do just spend money that you don't want to spend, but that's what the friend wants to do. So be it. You just sometimes have to accept things that you can't control. But then the biggest thing she did was, even though when she entered school, she was headed to a career that wasn't going to be high paying. I don't want to say what it was, but she decided to switch career tracks to go into cybersecurity consulting, which is a very high paying field. So she was very deliberate in her career choice. Where is the money going to be? Where am I going to be able to get a high paying job? Right? Because she knew she wanted to live in an expensive city. And number two, a lot of her friends are living with roommates in apartments or renting. She moved home. And we said, if you move home, we're not going to charge you anything as long as you are sticking to this goal. So she did have that. That's a huge luxury a lot of kids don't have, but she was able to live rent-free and effectively cost-free at home. We don't make her pay a bill every time she takes the soda out of the refrigerator. But so she was able to just literally sock away money for 2 years solid. And I think the pandemic in a way helped because she was missing out on less. So that probably helped in terms of emotions. While her friends, many of them live in rental apartments with friends and different things, different configurations. She was living at home. I think the pandemic, a lot of people lived at home. So that was okay. So now 2 years later, in addition to all those years, age 13 until college graduation, she had the money for the down payment and the closing costs and some furniture. She's not going to have that much furniture. We're helping her a little, but it'll come. We're doing some stuff for her. And I encourage parents to do some stuff. We're getting the floors done for her, some other stuff. But she was literally shopping for a bed and really thinking about, well, I'm going to get the headboard somewhere nice and I'm going to get the rest of the bed somewhere cheap. So it'll look really nice with the headboard. And I'm going to do the carpet from this place because I know it's decent quality, but it's very reasonable price. And so I've been really proud of how she's been very thoughtful in how she gears up for the apartment.
Congratulations. It sounds like you raised a financial grown-up.
I hope so. I hope so. It's a continuing process, but we're really proud of her.
So, Bobbi, you are a certified financial planner. So what's your investment philosophy?
I would say take a long view. What's really interesting is as I get older, it's no longer just about the money you're putting into retirement accounts. You start thinking, what's this going to look like on the other side when I start taking money out, which could be as early. 59 and a half is where you wouldn't get a penalty. I do not advise people to take money out at 59 and a half if they don't have to, but certainly by 72, and that the age I think may be changing for minimum distributions, but your early 70s, you have to think about how much will this translate into and how am I going to manage taking money out? Do I want to buy an annuity? Do I want to keep investing in stocks? Do I need to change my investment asset allocation? Things like that. So it's really important to think short-term, medium term, but also the long term. The other thing I'll tell you that is really important that I'm seeing much more today is also not to be irrationally frugal. Don't be afraid to spend the right amount of money as you live your life. I talk a lot about this famous trip I took to Iceland. We only went for 4 days because it's really expensive, but I'm so glad that we did it. And it was a really meaningful trip, even though it was only 4 days on the ground. So it's important that as much as you're saving, and you must automate that and keep going and make sure it's constantly tweaked for the age you are. In other words, getting less risk as you get older. Make sure not to be so focused on money and numbers and accounts that you forget to look up and live your life.
I think that's a great point, right? Because even though we all hoping that we'll be here for retirement, life is not guaranteed, right? So you do want to enjoy also the ride on your way to retirement.
Yeah. We just had Mother's Day. My mom passed at 62, never collected Social Security. So yeah, we have to live our lives.
Yeah, sometimes in the personal finance space, we're so focused on just cut down. And, it's definitely good to have your expenses under control and manage them. But I think you do have to live a life that you enjoy. I think that's important too.
Yes. What do you do? What's your philosophy?
Really, my philosophy is I don't want to worry about my investments every day. I do a mix of index funds and individual stocks. It's all long term. I'm not thinking about selling it tomorrow or even in 5 years. And I actually recently decided to get just a little bit of crypto on the side. I just kind of separated it from my portfolio. So I don't even see it. It's not much, but it's really like, okay, let's see where this thing goes. I'll just look at it in 5-10 years and hopefully it'll work out. But when it comes to retirement, I'm trying to be conservative, really.
Yeah. But it's important not to be too conservative because you need the money to grow. And if you have the time to take some risk, that's okay. I'm not alluding to crypto. I'm just saying more of a stocks allocation is what I'm saying versus people that get into things that aren't really going to give you much like CDs and bonds.
So do you do index funds?
I do. Yes. So I have a combination. The money that I quote manage myself is index funds. Almost 90%. I have a few individual stocks from a very long time ago. When I first started investing, I bought a few stocks. I haven't bought them really since I became a journalist because there's always an implication if you buy something and then if you were going to write about it. So it was really discouraged when I was a journalist to do that. And now because my husband works in consulting, it's also very precarious to buy individual stocks. So you know what? I just do index funds. And I will tell you, as I've gotten older, I do have some money that is, quote, professionally managed. And so within that, there are stocks and so on. For myself, I agree with you. I'm not going to spend the time. So I have some money with professional managers, and they do charge a percentage fee. So that is something that I had to get comfortable with. But at this stage in my life, I wanted that advice and that human component, even if it cost me some money. And that's a deliberate choice people can make or not make. And then I have money in index funds.
What's been your biggest financial mistake?
Oh, marrying the wrong person. I was divorced at 30. I'm now married to my forever husband, but I was divorced at 30. And I think that would have been an even bigger mistake had the marriage continued. But I didn't really understand that marriage is also a financial partnership. I mean, I did on the surface, but I didn't really understand that. And that is something that I think a lot of people need to be a lot more conscientious about, that you should absolutely be in love with this person. They should be your best friend, all the things. Also, it's a legal document that you are going to be bound together forever financially. And if you have children, by the way, it really is forever. I don't have children with my ex-husband, so it was in that sense a clean break. But I think that is a very challenging thing when you marry the wrong person. So just be aware. I didn't even ask my now ex-husband, what his income was before we were engaged. I felt it would be rude to ask that. And now I look back and I think, rude. This is someone I was tying my entire life to financially. And I didn't even know the numbers. Thankfully, he didn't have a ton of, I wasn't surprised by a massive student debt or credit card debt, but it happens to people where they marry somebody and then they find out that there's all this financial baggage behind the scenes that they just forgot to mention. And now that's your baggage. So you need to go into a marriage or any partnership, even if a business partnership, with your eyes open. And if you don't feel comfortable, as I did not, asking very personal money questions, you are not in a position to make that partnership, however you define it. And I just kick myself. We all do it.
And I think it's such a great point, and it's something that we often overlook before getting married because, we are just thinking about, oh, I'm in love, but there's like so much more to marriage.
Right. Well, and it's also, if you just ask someone like, well, okay, like, when do you bring it up? Oh, by the way, honey, I know we've been dating for this amount of time. How much do you make? There's never a not awkward time for that, right?
Absolutely.
I don't know. It's really hard. And I think that it came up a lot with my now forever husband because we'd both been put through the ringer and he was still going through his divorce when we met. So money was top of mind with both of us. So a lot of stuff was coming out naturally. But the first time, it's so awkward.
So how did you do it with your husband this time?
It was just coming out. It's kind of like when we were talking about before with the everyday money coming up with kids, because he was going through the divorce. This was all coming up. And we were very much into being financially open because of what we'd been through. We had no disagreement on the fact that we had to have a prenup. We had no disagreement on making plans to pay off, let's say collateral from his divorce in terms of financial responsibilities that he had to take on. Divorce is very complicated when there are financial assets involved. And so I had to be aware of what was going on because it was hitting me. I mean, unfortunately, courts were involved, children were involved, courts were involved, money's involved, all the stuff. So unfortunately, it came up naturally. The benefit is that I went in with eyes open.
Do you think everyone should get a prenup?
I think anyone with assets that could be a source of contention in a divorce should. And you should remember that could be your parents. So I think if you both are getting married with nothing or extremely equal, and your parents, your family's money will never be relevant, and you really don't want one, that's okay. But I think the mistake that people make is not getting one because they think it's not romantic. Then there might be a family business on one side, or there might be family assets that could be inherited. And that could be very complicated because, first of all, the spouse could go after it. And that's horrible to do to your parents. So think about your parents if you want to protect them. Also, if you're on the other side and you don't have the assets, maybe you want to be protected from being cut out because maybe you might be sacrificing something for the other person and there could be assets down the road and you want to have that protection for yourself. The other thing that could happen is if your parents want you to get a prenup and you refuse, and that's fine. That's your choice. They will also make their independent choice. And that might not be something that you like. And it's just very complicated. I think that it's a nice insurance policy to have. And I hope that everyone that has one never uses it. And by the way, A lot of them do not get admitted in court. A lot of them are voided, let's be honest, but it gives you a template. It gives you a document that reminds you of the mindset of where things were at the beginning. A lot of the time you're going to be in a state where, and I am not a lawyer, let me be clear, where it's going to override whatever you have. So prenups generally work when people really agree to stick to them. And that should motivate people to make sure that they are fair. Because if you are on the side of an unfair prenup, you have a lot of ammo in that you can say you signed it under duress. They said they wouldn't marry you unless you signed it or whatever it may be. You want a prenup that you're both going to be happy with.
Yeah, and I think it's best to make those type of decisions when everybody is happy with each other.
Exactly. Yes, I could not agree with you more. And I think that it's just a roadmap and you can fight in court and try to get everything thrown out. So it's just a roadmap and not to overthink it too much. I mean, definitely be careful, consult lawyers and so on. But if you're going to do it, just get it done.
So Bobbi, I like to end the interview with a round of rapid fire questions.
Sure. I'm bracing myself.
Tell me about a book that changed your perspective on life.
I just read a book called In 5 Years, and I'm forgetting the name of the author, but it teaches us how we make assumptions about where we're going to be. In this case, in 5 years, we think, where's the character going to be? And it's never what we think. Think about what happened with the pandemic. I cringe at some of the things that I was saying at the beginning of the pandemic. And now, I mean, who knew? They were saying, I thought it was crazy. 15 days to stop the spread is what they were saying. And look where we are now. So you just never know. And we make assumptions about things. And this book, it's written in a very skillful way where you jump to conclusions about certain things. And it's nothing for me, nothing like what you think. And that's how we should be open about life.
Wow. Tell me about something about money that you wish you could tell your younger self.
I sometimes have irrational frugality, that I missed some life experiences because of irrational frugality. Sometimes thinking I can't afford something because for example, maybe from my daily cash flow, I can't afford it, but I've saved so much money. It's okay to take a little money out of your savings for a purpose. Give every dollar a job, someone once told me. And that's important to remember, that just because it's in savings doesn't mean you can never touch it. It means you need to be really thoughtful about touching it, but that's not the same as never. And I look back at the things that I have done now as my kids get older, and I'm so grateful that we did do the things we did. And there are things we didn't do. And there are things we didn't do because of the pandemic even, that I'm a little bit wistful about. We had trips planned and experiences and things, and they didn't happen. So I think it's really important not to have irrational frugality, certainly not to the point where you don't do the things that you want to do.
What's the best investment in yourself you've made so far?
I'm going to give you something very specific and tangible because it's something I was so insecure about when I did it. I went and had professional headshots done only for my LinkedIn. This is before I wrote my book. And I said, I really want to present to the world in a certain place. And so I spent a certain amount of money that made me sick to my stomach at the time. I did tell my husband, he was a little sick to his stomach too. He's like, so you're just spending all this money. Oh, and hair and makeup and wardrobe. Okay. All to have a better LinkedIn picture because I wanted to have, and to have also for other things. Well, let me tell you, that picture that I spent so much money on at the time, now I look back, I'm like, that was nothing. But at the time, when I'm working, 3 young kids, paying tuition, all the stuff, the nannies, the whole thing, chaos in my life, holding down this very demanding job. And I'm going to go, even the time to do it was crazy. I didn't have the time to do it. Had to take a day off from work, the whole thing. Those pictures have gone everywhere. And in fact, one of them was on the cover of my book. Having professional headshots so that when someone wants a headshot of me now, or just in general, just to have a nice shot on LinkedIn, on Twitter, whatever it may be, really proved valuable. And it was at a time when it seemed indulgent and such a ridiculous waste of money and so self-indulgent. I don't know what the right word is, but it just seemed selfish, almost a selfish way to spend money, like vanity pictures, but it wasn't that. So I think it's really important to think how we present, and that spending money on things like clothing, the right clothing. I'm not talking about stupid purchases. I'm talking about really thoughtful, putting together a wardrobe that will help you present your best self. Having some photos taken, with your hair, done neatly in the professional way that you want to be perceived. Have your makeup done professionally. Have your photos done. That stuff can really go far, and it really does matter. And it took a lot of getting past my irrational frugality to make that a priority. And I think it served me well having those photos, and I need to get more. I've done some more since then. It's still hard for me to do it, but I think that having the sort of professional makeover, however you want to define it, is a really good investment in yourself.
Yeah, and it makes a huge difference. Fill in the blanks in 3 words or less. Money to me is
safety net.
What do you want your legacy to be?
Mom.
Bobbi, it's been an honor to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Please tell our listeners where they can find you, where they can get the new merch.
Yes. So I am so proud of my new merchandise line. You can go see it at grownupgear.com. It is to celebrate all of the milestones of adulting, and it's also just super fun. And my podcast is Money Tips for Financial Grownups, and you will be on it. So you must make sure to tune in, subscribe to that on all of the appropriate podcasting platforms. You can find out more about me at bobbirebell.com, Instagram, Bobbi Rebell 1, Twitter, Bobbi Rebell, and you guys can figure out the rest. I don't know anymore.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That was Bobbi Rebell, everyone. Here are my 3 key takeaways from today's interview with Bobbi. Number 1, we can do our part to build a more equitable workforce by being more transparent with our peers, coworkers, collaborators about what we earn. Key takeaway number 2, it is important to find ways to teach everyday money lessons to our kids by using our real life experiences. Providing more tangible tips or lessons can help them become financially savvy. Key takeaway number 3, when it comes to marriage or any type of partnership, it's important to have money conversations and be transparent and ask the tough questions before getting into a legally binding partnership. And actually, I recently released an article for Personal Capital on this subject, money conversations before saying I do. And I'll make sure to link the article in the show notes. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Coming up on the podcast this month, we have Jesse Iwuji, one of the only 2 Black NASCAR drivers and the first African driver. I will also be interviewing speaker, author, and celebrity ghostwriter Reed. If you enjoyed today's episode, here's what you can do to support me and help more dreamers discover the podcast. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. I read every single review, and I'll select 1 review to read on the podcast every month. Subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Share the podcast with your family, friends, and coworkers. And if you really enjoyed today's episode, tag me on Instagram at thedreamers.podcast and let me know what you liked about it. All right, dreamers, that's it for today. I will see you back here next week for another episode of the Dreamers Podcast.
Okay, dreamers. Time to build this legacy.
This podcast is for general information purposes only. It is not intended to provide any tax, legal, financial planning, insurance, accounting, investment, or any other kind of professional advice or services. Please consult with an appropriate tax, financial, or legal professional to receive appropriate advice based on your situation.
Sunday, Skincare Day, is one of the ways I keep my sanity in these crazy times. Jumino is an all-natural, Black-owned skincare brand carefully handcrafted by parents who could not find the proper care solutions to address their family skin problems. All Jumino products are made of organic and high-quality ingredients, meticulously chosen to give your skin the smooth results and the glow it deserves.